Astro Teller is the captain of Moonshots at X, and Miki Tomita is the head of Education Incubator, which is applying moonshot thinking to education here in Hawaii. We are so excited for these two to talk today.
You have.
Oh, do we have mics?
Yes, you are mic'd.
I was like, we don't have a microphone. Sorry. So my feet have been in shoes all day, and those of you that know me, this is a very weird occurrence for me. I think it's affecting my brain. I'm usually barefoot. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'm so excited to be on stage with you today and just talking about moonshots, moonshot thinking, and moonshots in education. For the sake of the audience that's here, you know, I think Astro and I were talking earlier today over lunch about what we wanted to convey to the group today. We had a wonderful lunch conversation around the kinds of change that we want to see in the world, whether it's in clean energy, whether it's in equity and access, whether it's in technology, whether it's in education, economy, our environment. And all of those changes require not just out-of-the-box thinking, but thinking that we've never even begun to imagine. And that's sort of the premise behind moonshot thinking, not just the 10% changes, but the 10 times, things that we think of as impossible. And so what we wanted to do was really just talk about two sort of separate but connected conversations that are woven together by the frameworks of moonshot thinking. Education Incubator and the program that we started at Moonshot Lab is really inspired by just a short video that I saw Astro and Rich and Megan in, talking about moonshot thinking, and we thought that's what we need. It's not just to solve the Earth's problems, but you could solve all the Earth's problems by solving the one problem, which is education. And so that's where Moonshot Laboratory Hawaii comes from, which is the program that I'm the director of. And we'll want to interweave that with the platform and vehicle of moonshot thinking and how it inspires us. And so how is it incorporated and accomplished at X? And then we'll talk a little bit about how it's incorporated and accomplished at Education Incubator, our Moonshot Lab, and kind of go through there. So Astro, I invite you to tell us a little about moonshot thinking and X.
Great. Well, let me give you a super short, super high level, and then we can dive in as appropriate. But for those of you who don't know, there's a company which you probably think of as Google, which is now called Alphabet. It owns a range of different companies. Google is one of those companies. X, which is the company that I run, is a different company that Alphabet also owns. Our job at X is to make new, potentially Google scale businesses for Alphabet to have. We call these moonshots. That's where the term has been, like, at least recently, popularized. And moonshot thinking is our shorthand at X for how we try to go about making these things, which we hope are going to do a lot of good in the world and produce a lot of value for Alphabet in the process. So, you know, I could describe it in a range of different ways. I'm going to describe it in our classic way for a second, but then I'm going to actually connect it to what Joey Ito said this morning, because I think there's a nice synergy. So super short, what we would say a moonshot is something that has three basic components. Number one, there has to be a huge problem with the world that you can name. You have a frictionless surface, good for you. That's not a problem with the world. Go back and tell me when you have a problem with the world that you want to solve. Number two, now that you've picked a problem with the world that you want to solve, let's say 1.2 million people die in car accidents every year. Fine, that's a problem. What is the science fiction sounding product or service that, however unlikely it is we could make it, if you could make it, it would make the problem go away? Once you can name that, cars that drive themselves, that doesn't sound so crazy now, but 8.5 years ago when we started it, that sounded pretty crazy. Then, number three, there has to be some reason to believe you could actually make that science fiction sounding product or service. A shot at doing it. Something that would make the world 10 times better and not just 10% better. So the connection I was going to draw to what Joey said this morning is, remember those 13 things that he put up there in reverse order? Essentially, if you worked at X, here's what it would feel like every day. And I wouldn't use quite these words, but to connect it to what Joey would say, every day I would say, why are you doing 1 through 12? Why? Or whatever, 13 down to 2, right? Why are you doing that? He told you that number one is the thing that's the longest lever. change your paradigm. Now, we happen not to use that term at X. The terms we use are things like perspective shifting, or we say 10x, not 10%. Cutting the Gordian knot. How many of you know about Alexander the Great cutting the Gordian knot as on his way to conquering Asia? So those are metaphors that we use, but what they basically boil down to is shift your paradigm. If that's the thing with the longest lever, why are we spending all of our time twiddling with the stuff that makes the least difference? Spend all of your time trying to change the way we think about things. That's where really powerful change comes from. That's what it feels like at X. That's what moonshot thinking is.
So I think one of the things that I was so drawn to in both visiting X and watching the videos and hearing from a variety of the top engineers there is that the opening of the Moonshot Thinking video, where Rich says, you know, the Polynesian dugout canoe was the original moonshot. And we've spent so much time thinking about that sentence, I think, with Hokulea, with Hawaii and our environment, and with our indigenous knowledge, our wayfinding practices here, thinking about what is it that's inside of us that innately points us in the direction of trying to accomplish these impossible tasks? And how can we harness the power of human creativity and ingenuity to accomplish things that others think of as impossible? And so if you could speak a little bit to like the personalities or the perseverance, the kinds of things that you see in the workplace, some of the driving forces at X that help people accomplish those things, maybe even the things that you discourage in those practices.
Sure, I'll do that, and then let me, at the end, I'm going to weave it back around to some of the people you're trying to train with moonshot thinking. So one way that I would describe what it feels like is, if you think that you're going to set out to solve a problem, and you're going to solve it better than other people have solved it before, by spending more money than anyone has ever spent trying to solve that problem, no. Not with my money, you're not. That's a terrible plan. You're going to be smarter than everyone who's ever tried to solve that problem before? No, you're not that smart. None of us is that smart. You're going to stay up later at night. You're going to work harder than anyone has ever. No. But you can be braver than anyone has ever been. That I believe you could do. You could be more creative than anyone has ever been. That I believe you could do. You could be weirder than anyone has ever been. That I believe you could do. So bravery and creativity and weirdness, which is the spirit of the explorer, those are the things which will drive you not to spend the rest of your life trying to untie the Gordian knot, but in a fit of exuberance or exasperation to get out your sword and cut it. Because that's what we need to do with the problems. I don't want very careful, very well-trained knot untiers. I want to people X, and you should want to people the state of Hawaii and the people trying to solve the transforming oil problem with people who cannot wait for the future to come find us, who don't want to carefully untie that Gordian knot and do everything the right way. You want people who are going to cut the Gordian knot, who are going to say, we're going to the future right now, and it's going to be a little bit painful, but everyone's going to catch up and we'll be much better and much happier when we get there. So one way, and this is, I'm going to connect it back to some of your people that you're trying to help. How many people here consider themselves, honestly, to be world-class creative? It's hard to raise your hand. No, but wait, I've played this game hundreds of times.
Where are the kids?
Exactly. How many people here think that you were anything short of a superstar at creativity when you were 6? I was. We all were. Oh, come on. You don't, you know you were. We all were. We train it out of ourselves. We beat it out of ourselves, and we let school in particular beat it out of us. It's hiding inside you. It's still there. You didn't lose the skill. It's just buried under a bunch of crap, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the job of moonshot thinking, is to remove all of those impediments that have piled up that prevent you from going and changing the world quickly. They've taught you to color within the lines. And that's not actually helping to change the world quickly. So I'm curious, you're working to try to inspire some very young people to do moonshot thinking. I would imagine on the one hand, it's easier for you than for me because it hasn't been fully beaten out of them yet, maybe. But also, I bet you they also feel like, well, I don't have any skills. How am I supposed to do anything?
Yeah, so I think riffing on what you said is so interesting because one of the things that we start our fundamental premise with is that for me and many other people, like school just kind of sucks, but it mostly hurts. It's not that interesting or inviting. People spend 8 to 10 hours a day wondering what they're there for. And then you have some meaning making and some joy, but a lot of it is self-guided and self-determined. And so what we did at Moonshot Lab was take those general principles and break out of school. So we created a school outside of schools or an unschool so that kids could feel like they matter now. So that it wasn't just in case learning where you learn everything just in case you need it later. It's just in time learning. So that you learn it when you think you need it and when it has value to you. And then you can reinforce it and go to community members and experts and practitioners to say, I don't know what I don't know yet, but here's what I think I want to learn, and can you help me learn that? And also empowering our kids, our students, to create that knowledge and to start imagining the kinds of work, not the kinds of school that they want to do, but the kinds of work that they want to do, the kinds of things that they want to accomplish. And we feel that that transformation of education that's based in self-determination and in the search for meaning will then transform our economy and our environment. And that's what our kids are doing. They're creating meaning. They're matching their passions with the needs of community members and solving problems with them and for them as innovation cohorts and inventing solutions that we've never seen before. And that really can only come from the beauty and the power and the strength of these children, or people that think like kids. So we need to find more of those too. We have one, there's a couple of them in the audience that think like kids still. And so if we can figure out a way to not beat that creativity out of kids during school, then we would be mildly successful.
Let me use an example I've heard 3 times today. I'm deeply, deeply compassionate for the problem. So this is going to sound a little bit roughshod at first. This isn't about the kids, and it's not about the engineers at X. So I just want to use an example of moonshot thinking, or it's, at least in the context of what we're talking about. Brian this morning raised the issue of equity. Remember that? And he said, let's make sure that we don't change things till we figure out how to provide equity for the people who would otherwise be left behind. It seems fair. Alvaro said basically the same thing. I have real sympathy for that. Then there was someone on stage just before us who basically said the same thing. You know what's going to happen? The change isn't going to happen, and it's going to be inequitous for everyone, including those people. Here's a crazy idea. What if we just said, we realize that every time we pretend that we're not going to leave people behind, we do. We make the changes, and then we forget about the people. This time, we're not doing that. We're going to make the changes that we have to make in Hawaii. We're going to do it at quadruple speed. It runs a significant risk of leaving people behind, and we're dedicated to not leaving them behind. That way, we've just removed one of the excuses I heard 3 times on this stage today about why the stuff that you guys say you want to do, but you all secretly are worried you're not going to do in the next 12 years, actually gets done in less than 12 years. Wouldn't that be awesome? And whether it's world-class engineers or high school students, all of us have trained ourselves not to think like that. We find reasons not to go quickly. But aren't you in a rush to make the world better? Enough of a rush that you're willing to be a little weird, if necessary to be a little unpopular, if necessary to make a change and then need to do diving catches for the people who otherwise would be left behind and just not forget about them because it's the right thing to do. Whatever it takes, let's do those things. So what? Yes. Yeah. When you take your kids through this kind of thinking, and every country, I do this all over the place, and France has their version of like, oh no, that's a little too much for us, and you know, everybody has that. What are your kids telling you about their upbringings, their communities, about Hawaii in general, and about its receptivity to being this kind of weird, this kind of impatient to go make their worlds better? Do they believe you when you offer this, when you dangle it in front of them?
You know, what's interesting about that is that I think maybe a generation ago or even a decade ago, that we would have been met with more skepticism, right? We would have had kids that were like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to accomplish that. And yet, when I think about hokulea and I think about taking a traditional voyage in canoe around the world to circumnavigate the world's oceans, like that's an impossibility, especially because it was the first canoe built in 600 years. And so when you think about these kids right now are growing up in a time where the impossible has been made possible, and they get to live it and lean into it, and they see value in their communities, and they see that perhaps, not saying that culturally it's not for us to be brave and to be brazen and to be bold, but to say, like, how can we as a crew, as a community, as a collective, how can we all search for a new destination? How can we all move forward to a better future that is of benefit not to ourselves but to our communities, knowing that that community health and well-being as island people is more important. That it can be a model for guiding us towards a better future, and in that, Hawaii leans into being a model for the world. And I think that they see that. I do. I think every day we see it in our kids, that they believe that change can happen and that they can be the agents of that change. And I say that because we took them out of school. And I'm not saying that school can't be fixed. I'm saying that maybe that's not my thing to fix right now, but we took them out of school and empowered them. And we set them free, and they are just moving faster and going places that we could not have imagined, and that's good.
I'm so glad to hear that. I don't mean this.
I feel like we're doing a lot of apologizing.
I'm practicing compassion.
Okay.
Wait till you hear what I'm going to say, and then this goal of getting to 80, 84% in the next 12 years, I know how impossible that seems, but let me tell you a secret about impossible. The glass ceiling in your life is mostly defined by your definition of impossible. Your creativity, your bravery, your audacity, that's your glass ceiling. There are a few laws of physics that are probably going to be hard to get around. Other than those, it's your attitude about what's possible that has defined the limits of what you can achieve. You can easily get there in 12 years. Easily. You have so much of a tailwind. When I was sitting in the audience listening to this, I thought, number one, you're talking about something that absolutely will happen to this place anyway. There's no question about it eventually happening. Wow, that's a huge check mark. Number two, you're totally hosed if you don't do it. There's a huge check mark. Number three, it's the single largest future industry in the world. Getting good at it probably isn't going to be bad for your citizens. There's a huge check mark. You're right, let's go slow. You guys don't need, this isn't even a 2x. This isn't even a 10x, this is a 2x. It's just like all the values just lying there. All you have to do is pick it up off the ground. You will encounter a ton of reasons why you can't do it, or why you can't do it now, or it's complicated. You know what? Everything is complicated, but this is not an anti-gravity drive. You can absolutely do this, and you can do this. You're going to save money when you do this. There's another huge check mark. Just go do it. Go do it by yesterday. Why 12 years? Why not 10? Why not 8? I haven't actually heard an argument about why it would even take 8 years to do it. Maybe it'll take you 8, but I'm not convinced it has to even take 8. It's about how fast you want it to happen, not about how fast it could happen. I was at lunch just now, or whatever, 2.5 hours ago, and we were talking about a set of laws that if they changed would make this easier. And I said, well, how long would it take for those laws to be changed? What is the actual practical time it would take to get those laws changed? And the mayor of Maui here?
Mayor Arakawa.
No, he said, well, I guess they're meeting right now. Could probably be changed by tomorrow. And I said, yeah, It's been years of arguing, and it might be years of arguing, but do not kid yourself. It could be changed by tomorrow. So it's that kind of thing, whether it's with high schoolers or with world-class engineers, that's actually the hard part. And it's part of why I'm encouraging you. It's not about making a self-driving car. We'll go make self-driving cars, and we'll bring them here, and it's actually going to improve your carbon footprint. But it's the attitude that we're both talking about with these respective groups that I think that you guys could steal today and take away with you to be inspired to see how much faster than you thought possible to make some of these changes. Can I do one more rant?
You can do one more rant.
All right.
And then we have to give them time, because
Fair,
this is not a talking at.
Why don't we give them? No, they can ask questions.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I ran the zoo here, I know that there's something that you have that people would really value. You are perfectly set up to be an innovation laboratory. If you'd have to mean this, and you'd have to actually prove it, but if you said to the world, we're going to get to the future faster than everyone else, we're determined to do that. And as a result, we want you to show up here with your latest and greatest. Probably, maybe particularly in the carbon footprint space, but maybe more generally too. We're not going to let you run any experiments that endanger our citizens, so there will be a sanity check, but it's going to be the fastest sanity check you've ever seen. And then we will let you run very controlled experiments and let them be bigger over time. If you did that, you wouldn't have to invent the future. The future would come and be piled up 6 deep around here, and you could just pick and choose the parts that you like best. But you'd have to make it appealing for the future to come here. And the example that I would use is one of our projects, which is self-flying vehicles for package delivery, which, by the way, has 1/20th the carbon footprint of bringing a pizza or a burrito or medicine to your door as bringing it in a car, which would take the congestion off the streets, a lot of the things that we've heard today. We're doing that, and we're rolling out that business in Australia. We're not against doing it in Hawaii, but Australia just made it easier for us. So that's why we're here. For the next carbon footprint lowering opportunity, what are you guys going to do so that they are dying to get here? They'll stand in line for the opportunity to do it in Hawaii first. That's what I would do.
So, yes, and I hope that part of that sanity check is a benefit to our place and our culture and our people, and also the elimination of a dependency model that we have for intellectual, our intellectual property and for any of our invention. I think that I do agree, Hawaii is a laboratory for all of that. And I think that we have a unique setting right now as being in the middle of the Pacific, as the blue lung of the planet, and being an icon for what compassion and aloha is in both our innovation and our entrepreneurship communities. I do think that we have a ripe setting for that. So again, with not wanting to spend all the time talking because I abhor a traditional learning model, we wanted to open up for just a couple questions, and I'm not sure we have 6 minutes on the clock that we can take some questions. Oh, Elena's coming with a microphone for you, although maybe if you use like a big indoor voice, we could still hear you.
I just want to know...
Oh, we need the microphone. Sorry, I just got scolding. Sorry.
Hello?
Please use the microphone.
Okay, so just wondering if you could comment on how the recent investments by Alphabet in AI have affected X.
I don't have a short answer to that, so I'm going to pivot your question a little bit. Almost everything we do has AI baked into it. AI is just counting. Like reality check, it's a fancy word for counting. So, level set on that. But let me tell you a quick story, because I think it's relevant to what we're talking about today. A part of Alphabet called DeepMind recently announced that it had used tools from artificial intelligence, from machine learning in particular, to essentially tweak the knobs inside our data centers without actually changing any of the machinery, and cause it to use 40% less energy to cool the data centers, which is one of the main costs of running the data centers from an energy perspective. 40% just by tweaking the dials. And I guarantee you that the people who run those data centers and had set those dials are not dumb people. think of the number of things in Hawaii that could have 40% lower carbon footprint just by letting tools from machine learning optimize your settings. I think that that is an enormous opportunity if you want to get towards carbon neutrality for your state.
Another question? Oh, Elena.
So what, at least from your perspective, what is the most innovating, world-changing, revolutionary idea that has come across your path?
Look, there are so many. This is probably not going to satisfy you. I'll tell you the first one that I thought of. Right now, there are a few disciplines in which there are really good simulators. And when there is a really good simulator, you can do a ton of experimentation really quickly. And real innovation is basically just try stuff. It's just try, learn, learn, learn. That's actually what innovation is, or that's how you get to really new, weird places. The fields that don't have a simulator are the ones like healthcare where we get very low rates of innovation. And so some of what's exciting me in a whole bunch of areas is the new growing opportunities to build simulators for industries that didn't previously have them, so you can ask what-if questions or do practical design what-ifs about your way of running a city or about building your new wind turbine or whatever that is in 1/1000th of the time at 1/1000th of the cost. That's just what's going to cause innovation to explode in those industries.
Another question?
Google funded a burger one time.
A burger?
A burger. It was a stem cell burger. It cost $330,000 to grow a burger that was a quarter pound. Curious, here we are in Hawaii. The fisheries industry is pretty big. The amount of plastic trash that floats up on our beaches, if you ever do a beach cleanup here, most of it is fishing gear coming from these commercial fishing boats. It occurs to me that we could solve a lot of problems by cellular agriculture of tuna steak, of ahi. You guys done anything in that realm?
We have not done anything in that. I'm pro trying to figure out how factories could produce animal protein in a way that would be much cheaper, so it would be available to more people. It would be more humane because we wouldn't have to kill animals. I see a lot of benefits to that. I would encourage us not to believe that that's going to happen so soon that we don't have to think through some of the crazy stuff we currently do with respect to chicken and pigs and cows and fish. Like, in the meantime, while we're solving that as fast as we can, I think we could do a lot better. You know, we stopped hunting animals something like 10,000 years ago, and we still hunt fish. Like, I bet you their time comes when we look back and say, we were hunting fish in the 21st century? That's kind of weird. Anyway.
So I think it looks like our time is about to wrap. Did you have like maybe a final words of wisdom or inspiration or a call to action or a scolding for the audience here around how to make it happen in Hawaii, our clean energy future, just a better way?
We were talking over lunch about this pottery example. The following experiment has been run in many different contexts, but I'll give you the pottery one, and then this is going to end with an encouragement to you. But the way this following experiment has been done several times is you take two different pottery classes. You tell both of them they're going to have a final project and that that's going to be 10% of their grade. You tell this group that they're going to be graded for the other 90% of their grade on all the things they do up before their final project. You tell this group that their grade for the other 90% of their grade is the weight of clay they throw before their final project. Every time they've run this experiment, that this team, in their final project, which is actually graded on how good the project is, crushes this team. Innovation is about practice. It is counterintuitive. If it was intuitive, it wouldn't be a problem. We just jump to the answer. You do not know the right way to solve all of Hawaii's problems. I don't know. None of us know it. You have to try stuff. So the faster you get good at running experiments, figuring out which of those experiments is doing what you want for Hawaii, do more of the experiments that work well, do less of the experiments that are not getting you what you want, the better off you will be. That's how I would get to your goals faster than you think possible.
Thank you. So way to play. Thanks, everyone.